From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to the Sox Machine podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, alongside the managing editor of SoxMachine.com. It is Jim Margulis as we record this episode Sunday night on January 8th, 2023, and we had plans for this episode to be a bit more upbeat. We just came off the hashtag 108 day show that we had at Reggie's Live with our friends from the 108. That was a lot of fun to be at and got to see a lot of folks within the White Sox Twitter community and fans of Sox Machine. And, of course, our friends Lawrence Holmes and Herbie Lawrence joining us in the panel. AJ Pollock is officially an old friend, signing with the Seattle Mariners, so we could finally resolve that story on just how much money that he possibly left with the White Sox, if any money that he left with the Chicago White Sox. Unfortunately, though, we have to start with this episode as late on Sunday, on his personal Instagram, Liam Hendriks, the Chicago White Sox all-star closer, announced he was diagnosed with Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and will begin treatment of his cancer starting on Monday, January 9th. And on his Instagram, Liam Hendriks wrote, "As a professional athlete, I have always been mindful to try and use my position in the public eye to the most positive ends possible by shining a light on causes or issues that touch close to home for myself, my wife, and my family. It is in that spirit that I want to share some personal health news I have learned in the past few days and do so on my own terms. Recently, I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Hearing the word cancer came as a shock to my wife and I, as it does to millions of families each year. However, I am resolved to embrace the fight and overcome this new challenge with the same determination I've used when facing other obstacles in my life. My treatment begins tomorrow, and I am confident that I will make a full recovery and be back on the mound as soon as possible. I know with the support of my family, my wife, my teammates at the Chicago White Sox organization, along with the treatment and care from my doctors, I will get through this." The statement from the Chicago White Sox General Manager Rick Hahn, quote, "Our thoughts and reactions at this time are for Liam the person, not Liam the baseball player. I know the entire Chicago White Sox organization, our staff, his teammates, and certainly White Sox fans will rally in support of Liam and Christy during the coming months. Knowing everyone involved, especially Liam, we are optimistic he will pitch again for the White Sox as soon as viable. In the meantime, we will do everything in our power to support our teammate and his family as they face this challenge while also respecting their privacy. We do not expect to have any updates on Liam's playing status prior to opening day at the very earliest." Jim, for White Sox fans, this is really tough news to hear in the past Sunday night, learning that Liam Hendriks is going to start the season on the injured list because of this cancer diagnosis.
It is. It definitely sucks, which is, I guess the plainest way to say it and obvious and maybe trite way to say it. But there's really, there aren't multiple reads of the situation. It's bad news. It's bad news that transcends like, oh, he strained a hamstring or he tweaked an oblique or something like that. It's going to cost him, 6 weeks. This is, indefinite. And not that say it's, bad news or like that's going to be like, I shouldn't say the worst news and it's going to be, a years long battle. It could be relatively brief, I guess, as cancer goes. Like John Lester, I think, was in 2006, and then by the middle of 2007, he recovered from his non-Hodgkin lymphoma. So, there are a range of outcomes here, and spectrum is, from, I guess a minor inconvenience to a career to, something a lot more serious, but, without knowing much right now, aside from the statement, you just, you kind of pause the baseball thoughts and the attempts to try to map out potential bullpens and late inning combinations and high leverage guys and just, there's a time and place for that because it is a team sport and he's part of the team. And when he's gone from the team, there are, discussions to be had as to who picks up the slack. But immediately after learning the news, it's probably best to just try to tamp down those instincts and be more along the lines of just like, well, hope, he handles it. He and his wife are able to handle it well, and hope that they have supports. And, seeing him rally to other causes, it does seem like, it is his mindset to try to, raise awareness, whether it's, money for research, whether it's just money for, support systems for facilities that do well to support families. Like, I can see him, using this to, I guess, shine a light on organizations doing good work, quietly, on this sort of stuff. So, I guess that's the, trying to, look for lemonade out of lemons. That would be it. And he seems like he does have that kind of mindset to try to make the best of a bad situation.
Man, the last 2 seasons since Liam Hendriks has joined the Chicago White Sox, he has 75 saves in 127 games appeared, which is 128.2 thirds innings. He has racked up 198 strikeouts with a 4.3 WAR. And obviously on the field, he means a lot to the Chicago White Sox. But as you mentioned, Jim, the organizations that he shines light on, ever since he's joined the Chicago White Sox, and this was well reported, especially from James Fegan of The Athletic, that part of the pursuit or his free agency landing with the White Sox is asking teams that were interested in him if they had Pride Night, because that is a cause that's very near and dear to both Liam and his wife Christy's heart. And ever since he signed with the White Sox, he has been buying lunches and donating money to lots of first responders in the south side of Chicago, to schools, to medical care professionals, especially during COVID, as an appreciation or the aftermath of COVID, for all of their hard work, and just letting them know from the Hendriks family that they're thinking about them. And here's a nice little gesture to help you out. And he's done that often since he's been with the Chicago White Sox. And he has been a nominee of the Roberto Clemente Award from the Chicago White Sox, and he's been known to be a great teammate as well. So he is someone he's been easy to root for and easy to rally around. And I know that we are all hopeful that Liam Hendriks does recover from this diagnosis, and I'm confident that he will, even though he is right. I mean, at the age of 33, he turns 34 in February. I can't imagine going to the doctor's office, Jim, and being told you have cancer. Like that has to be quite the gut punch.
Yeah, and I guess the one thing I think about is, like, we've seen in baseball media, a couple of high profile, battles with health. Like, Emily Walden had breast cancer, and, and right now Sarah Lings is dealing with ALS, and Emily has, she says she's won her battle. ALS is a lot, different of a conversation, but, Sarah's trying to make the most of it. But, I guess those are the first 2 people I thought of in just terms of, like, this seems like it's been a thing recently of just learning about, people who, shouldn't be having these thoughts, should, in the primes of their careers, and, having to deal with these very real challenges. So yeah, it's terrible. It's, there's really a few other words. You can just pick synonyms of those words and keep coming to it. The one thing I thought of that was, like, baseball related was that I wonder if this is why Rick Hahn was not, maybe that's why it interrupted the Andrew Benintendi announcement. Like, if this was something that, they didn't want to reveal. And so it was awkward that, he had the Zoom call and then they had the separate press conference with Pedro Grifol announcing Benintendi. And, given the White Sox, isolationist offseason, it did seem possible that he just, they weren't interested in the full fanfare of a free agent announcement. But, and given that they didn't say anything, you can draw your own conclusions based on what they've done so far. But, having seen that he said recently he was dealing with this, they might have had, other things on their table in terms of, like, learning about it, figuring out how to go about announcing it, figuring out what what they need from other guys, and just learning, how to go about, conversations with Pedro Grifol and Ethan Katz about late inning planning and how to prepare guys going into spring training in the World Baseball Classic. So, perhaps that was on his mind, and looking back to, last week. And so it's just probably, maybe that was the reason why, and they couldn't say it because, it's his thing to announce.
Yes. And you mentioned John Lester. So for those wondering, When could you possibly see Liam Hendriks pitch for the Chicago White Sox? That really depends as far as the treatment and what his doctors advise. As Jim mentioned, John Lester was diagnosed in September of 2006, and he returned to the Boston Red Sox in the middle of the 2007 season. He famously threw a no-hitter during the 2008 season, and obviously John Lester went on to have a fantastic career with both the Boston Red Sox and the Chicago Cubs, winning multiple World Series titles. Andres Galarraga, the big cat, was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and he had to miss the entire 1999 season. When he returned in 2000 at the age of 39, he had 28 home runs, 100 RBIs, and he had an 895 OPS. So there are some high-profile players that have had to deal with what Liam Hendriks has done. And not only have they returned to playing Major League Baseball, but they've been returned to play at a very high level in both Galarraga and Lester's cases. So that's what we're hoping for here as White Sox fans, that he can recover quickly from this, and hopefully with the early screening process, they caught it early enough that they are able to treat it and he can recover. Will he return this season? Not quite sure. What does this mean for next year? I don't know either.
Well, so with John Lester, it reminded me that in 2007, when he was making his return, I went to a Charlotte Knights game in Pawtucket when he was rehabbing, coming back from it. It was his first start for the Paw Sox in Pawtucket, and given that that's like 45 minutes away from Boston, and you have a lot of, they drew really well back in those days in Pawtucket. They're in Worcester now, but it was a great way for Red Sox fans to see. Red Sox didn't not pay Fenway prices, and I remember that he made a start against the Knights, and I was there, and just the round of applause he got for taking the mound, and the way the fans support him, and basically after his first pitch, after his first scoreless inning, coming off the mound at the end of his start, just everybody was behind him. And so I imagine it'll be kind of a similar thing as he works his way back, whether it's, going up the rehab ladder, or, when he makes his return to guaranteed rate field. That was something that always stood out to me in that start. And, that was, given the career he's had since, that's, like you said, that's what you hope for, is just mild inconvenience, like it looked like, like a Tommy John surgery like that on his record, or that kind of blip on his record. Obviously, it's a lot deeper than that, and hopefully, it's a case where just he's able to do some good along the way for some organizations in Chicago and elsewhere to bring some people and some places and some organizations up with him as he's going through this.
And to go back to Rick Hahn's statement, we do not expect to have any updates on Liam's playing status prior to opening day at the very earliest. That is a pre-warning shot to the media that you can ask questions, but the White Sox will not have answers on Liam Hendriks' availability at the very earliest, late March. So for everybody involved, whether that's working for the Chicago White Sox, Liam Hendriks' teammates, those of the media, what we do, fans, we're all kind of the same boat here as far as Hendriks' status, that we really don't know, but we're all hopeful that we can see him soon, and hopefully soon means the 2023 season, but Hendriks needs to take as much time as possible to recover from this cancer, so hopefully it doesn't come back in future years. But all the best to Liam Hendriks and his family. It's always a tough battle when it comes to cancer, especially for loved ones to hear that news. And, for White Sox fans, this is really tough to hear, that they're not going to be able to see Liam Hendriks and his closer entrance, at least at the beginning of the season, while he fights this battle.
Yeah, I would expect it to be, kind of a second half. That's kind of what I'm thinking, if anything, this year. Give him all the time, but plan for going without him. And I think that's, I thought a good move on Rick Hahn's part, just saying, he won't be ready by opening day. So all the spring training stuff will be discussing the plans as though, you just prepare your questions and prepare your article, your coverage, what have you, of just as if they traded him. Just, it would be kind of the same thing. Going about, Lopez, Crochet, Bummer, Graveman, etc. Hopefully, it'll be a case where, given it's Arizona and they train there and such, hopefully he'll be around to at least, present an optimistic, some good news. Like if he has good news on the case, like hopefully he'll be able to show his face and talk to people, because we know like he likes talking to the media and such, and is very open when, he can be, good times and bad baseball wise. So hopefully it'll be a case here where, he's up for talking about and he'll have good news to share.
Yes. And hopefully we do hear good news soon from Liam Hendriks about his process right now as far as treatment with the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So best of luck, Liam. We're all rooting for you for a quick and full recovery. And it'll be great to see him back in a Chicago White Sox uniform pitching again in 2023 if he gets that chance. We're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsors. But coming up next in the episode, we will be recapping hashtag 108 Day, and AJ Pollock becomes officially an old friend next on the Sox Machine podcast. Welcome back to the Sox Machine podcast. All right, so more uplifting. This past Saturday, we had our hashtag 108 Day event that we tagged along with our friends from the 108s, representing everything that goes on with hashtag 108ing at Reggie's, the South Loop of Chicago. And it was a very fun time. I know a lot of people have FOMO these days, and I definitely felt as far as the FOMO, especially on social media, as pictures were posted, Jim, of the night. But it was great to see you in person. I'm glad that there's no problems with Southwest Airlines for you to get to Chicago from Nashville. And it was a fun time.
Yeah, it was great to see you. Great to meet Lawrence for the first time after talking to him for so many times. I've never actually met him, so it was great to actually shake his hand and say, thanks for sharing the score with us. And also great to see the 108 guys. Fun conversations. I got, I would say 1.5 comments about people thinking I was 20 years older than I actually am, based on my voice and my demeanor, I suppose. So that's always... I take that as a net positive. I guess I'd rather be like, God, are you the crypt keeper? Like, just, you sound like you're 40, but you turn out to be, 75. But yeah, it's kind of like, always get that. Always also realize that my voice stamina, when it comes to talking in loud places, it needs some work, because just based on the last few years between the pandemic and then having a baby, just don't spend a lot of time in loud places talking to people at loud volumes. So basically, by the last hour, I was sounding like I was 13. Hey guy. So yeah, I basically ran the gamut age-wise, I think. But no, it was a great time. Great to finally get the whole Reggie's vibe after hearing about it for a couple of years, and hearing the legend of 108 days past. And yeah, great meeting everybody too.
Yes. And for those that did get a chance to come, it'll happen again next year. We're looking at finding a bigger venue so you could have more people. We had over 100 people at the event Saturday night, and I feel like we could have even more. And just the excitement and the buzz for those that attended, and that they were excited for the event. And the place, again, we sold out in just a couple of days back in November for this particular event. It does make me, again, a little bit confused on why the White Sox don't have Sox Fest. Because even if White Sox fans, the majority, are angry, they probably would have had really good sales for Sox Fest, especially if you brought up Oscar Colas or some of the younger players to get an opportunity for fans to meet them. And the new manager, Pedro Grifol. Grifol could have fielded questions from the fans directly, and they got to be introduced to Grifol, because the White Sox fans did not have a chance to meet Tony La Russa because there wasn't a Sox Fest the last couple of years, or the 2 years that La Russa was the manager of the Chicago White Sox. So that would have been great. And I think the White Sox missed out on those opportunities. And 108 Day just backed up my feelings about the White Sox are missing an opportunity here, not having Sox Fest.
Yeah, the thing that confuses me about like the lack of Sox Fest is that I know there would be a lot of vitriol and people on Twitter and Facebook saying like, can't wait to get Sox Fest tickets so I can, rip Rick Hahn a new one, or, grill Pedro Grifol or what have you, like, ask Lucas Giolito why he was such a disappointment, but when it comes to actually spending the money, like, most people won't spend that much money to be mad. Like most people who go to Sox Fest want to have a good time, want to bring their kids, want to meet their favorite players, want to, get pictures, want to, meet, for the older fans, meeting players that they liked when they were kids. Like it's more for that than expressing here. I know that gets the news coverage because it is the newsworthy part of the proceedings, is what we learn from Rick Hahn's answers and Pedro Grifal's answers, and the occasional flare-ups from the which have been fewer and further between, because the White Sox, between raising prices, then alternating the schedule to where the VIPs got like the most exclusive access, and the people paying VIP prices aren't going to yell at Rick Hahn, basically. Like that's generally the idea, is, just in like the last, I would say, like 8 years, I think, of Sox Fest has been always pretty muted and always pretty positive and upbeat, and whatever questions that do come up that are hard hitting can be deflected, because there's usually like a kid right afterwards saying like, what's your favorite color? And everybody laughs, and just, it's not a sustained grilling usually. And I think even if it were, whether it's, Rick Hahn, whether it's Pedro Grifal having to answer for some of Tony La Russa's crimes, which might have been the case. Like, here's what I don't want to see from you. And somebody reads a list of everything Tony La Russa did wrong. There's still, I think, as painful or as much as the White Sox personnel might not want to do it, there's value in just taking it and just saying like, yep, it was bad, and just, making sure you have some canned answers for, accepting it, like rolling with the punches, and maybe having a joke that, makes fun of you a little bit. Not like Jerry Reinsdorf talking about like, we don't win enough games, as though he doesn't have an active hand in it. But there are ways to support what the fans are saying, why they don't like you, why they thought you were a disappointment. And at the end of the day, like, you win a little bit more respect for just standing up and taking the Rotten Tomatoes, or sitting in the dunk tank and just letting it happen. So that's, I think, a missed opportunity there. And if they come, stumbling out of the blocks, I think it's there is no goodwill that they built up that they can lean on for April. Like that Sox Fest might have provided. Like, there's just, they're keeping fans at arm's length. We'll see what the ticket prices actually are when those come out, and what those look like. But treating the fans as though they're unwanted, I think that's kind of the theme. It does make it a lot. It does put the pressure on them to actually perform, or else you're going to see the attendance and ratings and just the entire discourse around the White Sox just plummet.
And those sentiments were also shared in the first panel during #108 Day with our friends Lawrence Holmes of 670 The Score and Herb Lawrence as well from CHGO. Like, we're not the only ones that feel this way with the way the White Sox have been handling, especially this offseason. Again, I think it's a missed opportunity. If we could sell out a place like Reggie's, there's enough excitement, even though people may be angry at the Chicago White Sox. There's still excitement to do something. It's just going to look really weird when the Cubs have their fan convention, I think in a week or two in Chicago, and the White Sox have nothing. Like, it's going to be weird. It's going to be a weird vibe. But for all those that met us at #108 Day at Reggie's, thank you so much for introducing yourselves. And it was great to meet everyone. And I can't wait until next year when we do it again. And I can't wait to see a lot of you in Cincinnati for the #108 road trip when the White Sox play the Reds May 5th through May 7th.
Yeah, I think the thing I learned from just talking to people and listening conversations and watching the interactions is people want to like the White Sox. Like, it's a lot more enjoyable when the White Sox are enjoyable. Like, I know that we often hear, because we tend to have pessimistic reads on things or cynical interpretations of, club explanations or whatnot, saying like, oh, you guys are happy when they fail. And, or just, like, guys are rooting for, the worst possible outcome, so you'll be right. And like, no, it's people want to like this thing. People, right now, I think 108 Day and just watching fans get together and in various forms, and whether it's online or in person, just like they lean on each other and we lean on each other, just get through it with gallows humor or whatnot. But ultimately, like, it's people are showing up to these things and putting money down. Even if they're not spending money on the White Sox, they're spending money and time on White Sox stuff because they they hold out a glimmer of hope that it'll be entertaining, and not just fun bad, or not just like a train wreck or a car crash everybody's rubbernecking past. They want it to work. So that's kind of my lasting impression. It was a lot of, kind of doom and gloom, or at least, dour, just because the White Sox have so much to prove, and there's no reason to give them any particular benefit of the doubt on a team-wide level. But people want it to happen. People want to be proven wrong. People want Yasmani Grandal to hit 25 homers, even if they hate him right now. People want Yohan Moncada to look like he did in 2019, even if music video jokes write themselves and are very easy to lean on for, quick jabs. Like, people want to root for a good team. And ultimately, it keeps coming back to that. And the White Sox just, by not showing up, makes it hard to think that they have. They're not putting money where their mouths are. Like, when it comes to voicing optimism, well, it's like, well, if you're optimistic, why aren't you talking to your fans? Why aren't you having Pedro Grifol out there? Why aren't you having, just as many starters on last year's team out there to meet fans? When you're not talking, it makes you think like, oh, it's not good. And they kind of fear it's going to be not that good.
Well, we have some baseball news as A.J. Pollock officially becomes an old friend. Pollock signed a 1-year, $7 million contract as he'll be with the Seattle Mariners for the 2023 season. And for those keeping score at home, remember, A.J. Pollock turned down a player option for $13 million to play with the Chicago White Sox. Instead, he got a $5 million buyout. So he got $5 million in his back pocket from the White Sox, and now he'll get $7 million from the Seattle Mariners. So that's $12 million for those that could do quick math, meaning that A.J. Pollock has left $1 million on the table. Or has he? According to USA Today's Bob Nightingale, A.J. Pollock also has incentives in his contract with the Seattle Mariners that he can earn an additional $3 million with the Mariners if he can hit those incentives. Those incentives have not been made public yet. But Jim, let's say he doesn't hit those incentives for XYZ reason, poor performance, he gets hurt. A.J. Pollock left $1 million on the table to not play for the Chicago White Sox, and now he is playing for the Seattle Mariners. Does that give us any additional insight in what Pollock's thinking was when he had this decision in, I would say, late October?
I would say not really, when it comes to just trying to project any kind of feelings, or whether this is like a vote of confidence or a vote of no confidence in the White Sox. It looked like he wasn't having fun on the field, but I think that's partially, he does have resting, whatever you want to call it, safe for the family face. And it wasn't like he didn't have a whole lot of highlights to where he's going to smile. Like, a lot of it, he was struggling the whole year. So it's not like he's going to be, looking like he's having a lot of fun out there based on the way he was playing. There were a lot of just, kind of blank stares out in the field after like a ineffective fly out, for the third out of an inning. So it's easy to look at him and say like, he wasn't having fun. It's the White Sox fault. And maybe that's the case, but I think, looking at the deal he signed before learning about the incentives, I kind of looked at it as, well, everybody's right. We thought, or at least I thought, that A.J. Pollock was going to re-sign, I thought the smarter call was for him to re-up with the White Sox because he would be hard-pressed to get $8 million on the open market. And he didn't, at least, right now, but, for $7 million, that's close. And when you look at it, like, is 1 million or whatever, percentage, that is after taxes and such, enough for like a lateral move? And if you look at it that way, like, people talk about that all the time, like I'm taking a slight pay cut, but it's better for hours, better location, more what I want to do, working with people I want to work with. And, any kind of reasons, like, people take pay cuts all the time in order to position themselves in a better way. In this case, like, if he feared he was going to be blocked, and if he feared his playing time was going to dry up, or if he just, in this case, wanted to bet on himself. Like, he both lost and won with this deal with the Mariners, because like, it does look like they do have a little bit of a crowded outfield. He might be crowded out of it into like a role player role, but he might be in it might be a better situation for him personally. It might be a case where I'm not going to be traded. Like this team signed me. They're not going to trade me. Like White Sox might re-up him. Then they might send him to Detroit or something like that. Like, or someplace that's not contending. So he could pick his location. He could pick a contender. He can sign knowing that he's not going to be traded at least for, until the deadline. You can't necessarily say he'll last the full season, but probably for that, for a number of reasons, it's worth it for somebody like him who's already had a big payday to, take $1 million hit, which might not be a hit in the end, just to avoid like worst case scenarios for his future. Like he ends up on a White Sox team that gives him 150 plate appearances, and they're not good. Like that's, that could be a case where like he made $1 million more or whatever, but he could be kicking himself because now just like, how can he sell himself next time he's on the open market? So probably worked out for him personally, even if it is like a little bit of money. Like it's a professional decision and he didn't lose. Like I think that's probably the way to say it. Like maybe he didn't win, but he didn't lose.
Yeah, the White Sox, if Pollock decided to opt in, he would be the left fielder instead of Andrew Benintendi for the White Sox. Unless the White Sox could find a suitor to trade Pollock in this hypothetical scenario that we're going through. And that would have been worth $13 million. Instead, they pay $5 million because A.J. Pollock doesn't want to play for them anymore. And they sign Andrew Benintendi to that contract, but his base salary for this upcoming season is just $8 million with a $3 million signing bonus. So to move from A.J. Pollock to Andrew Benintendi for the Chicago White Sox this year, it's just going to cost them $3 million more with A.J. Pollock leaving. Mm-hmm. If A.J. Pollock had stayed, it would have been $13 million, but now that A.J. Pollock has left, it's going to cost the White Sox a total of $16 million to have Andrew Benintendi play left field.
Yeah, and there's also the resource saving in terms of effort. Like we saw with the Craig Kimbrell thing after they exercised his option, how long it took to trade him and how long it lingered over the proceedings. And is he going to be an 8th inning guy or a 7th inning guy? How can he win back the confidence if he starts the season on the White Sox? And it looked very possible that he might have. And then, at the end of spring training, A.J. Pollock becomes available and they make that deal. But who knows how many moves the White Sox didn't make because of the threat of Kimbrell's money being on the payroll, just, not knowing whether the outfielder they would need or thought they, needed. In the case like Pollock just ended up giving the White Sox something they already had, which is, the ability to hit lefties. But it took a lot of time and energy. And this is a case where, Benintendi, the White Sox favor, because now it just became, they know what money they have. They don't have to try to trade A.J. Pollock or figure out how to work with him. And they can just devote, the effort and the money to the most direct solution possible, which is signing Andrew Benintendi for money versus trying to find the right trade partner. So it does strike me as like, mutual options are never exercised because just usually it's a way to, like Mike Clevenger, like he has a mutual option, just a way to, backload money to a second year. Basically, it's like a glorified buyout or a glorified deferred payment. But in this case, it was like a mutual option. Like it was mutually beneficial for Pollock to reset his career in a place that might give him a better opportunity for positioning himself for his, the remainder of his 30s. And then you have a mutually beneficial outcome for the White Sox in which they get the money and the outfield spots with no questions and able to pursue every solution, find the right one that worked for their budget and, for all the other needs like left-handedness, defensive abilities, on-base percentage, etc. So yeah, it was like the rare mutual option that wasn't actually a mutual option.
In the end, it works out. I mean, it was a contract that A.J. Pollock signed with the Los Angeles Dodgers.
Yes.
That might be part of the reason he bought out. Or he decided to take the option money from the White Sox and enter free agency because he didn't sign that contract with the White Sox. He signed that contract with the Dodgers. And that was the idea was, I'm going to continue playing in Los Angeles. And that did not come to fruition. So we'll see what Pollock does. I think from a roster standpoint, as far as a chance to contend, this is kind of an upgrade for A.J. Pollock when you compare the teams on paper between the White Sox and the Seattle Mariners. The Mariners are still going to have a tough time in the West against the Houston Astros. They have to play better against the Astros if they're going to overcome them and win the American League West. But we'll see A.J. Pollock again, this time as a White Sox opponent later in 2023.
Yeah, the one thing I thought about with Pollock is, you mentioned that Seattle is in a better position, but one thing I thought about is thinking like, which one's the better team when you balance divisions and such, is with the more balanced schedule, Seattle has to travel a lot more. Like they already logged the most miles in baseball, and that was often times blamed for, their postseason drought and their inability to sign like the premier free agents, and like Robinson Cano was such an outlier for that reason, and they had to pay him like more than the Yankees were willing to just because of that. And like now they have to travel even more. So I'm curious. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, hadn't really seen anything about that, but AJ Pollock signing there gave me reason to think about it in terms of just if we're making our preseason predictions, over the course of the year for divisions, who's going to advance to the ALCS and the World Series. It's one thing I'm wondering about and kind of looking for every once in a while when I follow Seattle writers and such to see if they write anything about that, because we heard so much about that when they're struggling. Will that be a challenge now that they're good, or do they finally have the talent that makes it more or less a mild nuisance and we won't hear anything about that?
We're going to find out. But
yeah.
Again, in recent news, I mean, AJ Pollock is with Seattle. Adam Engel is with San Diego. And that kind of follows up with Danny Hendriks signed with the New York Mets. So the White Sox outfielders and utility guys are signing with contenders. They're not signing with like the Tigers, Royals, or Pirates. Like these guys are signing for contending teams. Maybe they're better than what we thought.
Yeah, two things about the Engel signing is one, like I realize I have no idea how many players are on the Padres roster. It feels like their 26-man roster is like at 34. And their 40-man's at like 51. Like it feels like they keep adding guys, and you never hear about the ones because they're so transactional. Just you don't hear about the players go off the roster and they acquire so many big names. Engel's not a big name, but he's known to us. That it just feels like the name recognition is very high on that roster, and it makes it feel overstuffed. The other funny thing was I was at the airport when that news broke, and I was checking Twitter because. The Engel signing was, it lasted 13 minutes as the top news story in the NL West before the Dodgers announced that they were not going to retain Trevor Bauer and that they were designating him for assignment. So just his time in the sun for the division, the new division for him lasted 13 whole minutes, too short of Andy Warhol.
Well, at least he got in the spotlight. I'm curious if he'll make the team, because he said that's a pretty stacked team that Adam Engel is going to be trying to help out with. But yeah, the guys that White Sox fans were not crazy about, they're signing with contenders. So maybe the contenders are crazy about Danny Hendriks, Adam Engel, and AJ Pollock. We'll see how they fare in 2023.
Good luck, though. Happy trails.
Yes, happy trails indeed. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. If you just discovered us, you can subscribe to the Sox Machine podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. You can follow us on Twitter. We're at Sox Machine. You can follow me on Twitter at SoxMachine_Josh. We take the full episodes of the podcast now and we upload them into our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine. We're inching closer to the 1,000 subscribers milestone. So if you could give us a hand, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel yet, we would greatly appreciate it. Again, that's youtube.com/Sox Machine. If you enjoy our work and you would like more, you can help support us at patreon.com/Sox Machine, where our Patreon supporters, they get more. They get exclusive content. They get ad-free versions of both the podcast and website. And when we have new Sox Machine swag in the store, they're the first ones to receive it. Monthly plans start at $2, or you can save with an annual subscription. Again, sign up at patreon.com/Sox Machine. The Sox Machine podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com, your home for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.